I appreciate everybody taking time out of their schedule to attend this webinar today. This is Closing and Answering Objections. It's kind of a fun little seminar. I've enjoyed training this area for a long time, and before I get going, I just kind of want to make sure I point out one thing to everybody. When it comes down to giving a presentation, there's a lot of different ways to present a product to a client. One of the ways happens to be the way that I like to do it is I like to use presentation. I like to go through that presentation and hopefully bring all the objections to the surface before I reach the end of the presentation, so that at the end of the presentation, all I have to do at that point in time is logically move into the application, etc. But there are other ways of selling. One of the ways of selling we see a lot of agents use today is to go out there and use a very short sales presentation, a very short explanation area, and then throw the quote on the table and handle answering objections totally. In other words, basically the sale is done in answering the client's objections. And I'll tell you what, both ways of selling are very effective ways of selling. But the fact is, they both utilize the same underlying concept. And the same underlying concept says, when we go out there and we present a product, it doesn't matter what product we're presenting, we get to the end of the presentation and we ask the client to make a decision. Now, in our presentation, we use the starting the process method. We get to the end of the presentation, we say, here's the deal. You couldn't make a decision today on whether you wanted to buy long-term care insurance, even if you wanted to. The fact is, long-term care doesn't work that way. It's not like auto insurance. You can't look at me and say, I want to buy a policy and me write you up. The only thing we can do for you is we can start the process. That means we need to fill out a detailed medical history on you, send it into an insurance company with a small down payment. It's going to take them 6 to 8 weeks to make the decision if they either want to offer you a policy or not. And understand, there's a chance that they won't offer you the policy. If that occurs, they'll notify me, and you didn't have to make any decision. You got turned down. You can't buy long-term care insurance. If they decide that they are willing to accept you, then they'll notify me. I'll come back out here, and now it's decision time. So I call this the working period of time. It's the time for people to think about what they're doing and make sure they're making a good decision. It's a time for them to read the brochure, read the outline of coverage. Why? Because I know people. And I know that if you guys do buy long-term care insurance from me, when I bring this policy back, you're going to take the policy in the other room, you're going to stick it in your file, and you ain't never going to look at it again. Anybody asks you, you're going to go, yep, Mark's got me covered. So I tell people, at least in the beginning, let's make sure you have kind of an understanding of what you bought. This is a time frame to research. This is a time frame to discuss it with your children. So that at the end of the 6 to 8 weeks, when I come back out here, you'll have a chance to have thought about this and make sure you're doing the right thing. Now, that's a pretty soft close. But realize when I do this close on a client, or you do this close on a client, or you do any close on a client, when you reach this point in time, you reach the point in time that you have to realize that even if you warm the client up perfectly, even if you've given a perfect presentation, even if you design a perfect set of recommendations, what's the best thing you can hope for? The client is going to object. And always remember one thing, that's what we get paid to do. Anytime a product reaches a point where the client's not going to object to it, let me tell you something, we're going to get rid of you guys as fast as we possibly can. We are going to take that product and we're going to find alternative methods to market to the consumer. We'll take it downtown, hang it on a shelf, and people will come downtown and buy it. We'll send a mailer out saying, you need this coverage, and people will do it. Anytime a product reaches the point that the client knows they have to buy it, there's no more need for a salesman there. So the best thing we can hope for is the client's going to object. And what we have to do is recognize exactly what that means. When I first started out in selling 37 years ago, I attended Larry Wilson, and I learned the quadrant formula. The quadrant formula says if I take a box and I draw a line right down the middle and across the middle, and then take my pen and start putting marks all over there. Okay, these are clients that we're positioning in the quadrant formula. The positioning of the client in this formula dictates the number of closes that that client will need in order for them to buy any product out there. The range is pretty simple. We start up in the upper left-hand corner with what we call the happy-go-luckies. Happy-go-luckies are great people to sell. When you go out there and you make a sale, you walk out of that house, you're going to go, wow, is selling long-term care insurance, is this easy? I'm going to make a fortune. Unfortunately, happy-go-luckies are few and far between. The reason we call them happy-go-luckies is because you can pretty much go out there and show them any product. And if they remotely think they might possibly ever use that product, if they remotely think they can possibly afford it, they're going to buy. And they're going to buy on the first close. They're great fun to sell. Too bad there's not very many of them. Opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the people that we call the pure analyticals. Or in our industry, sometimes we refer to these as the anal retentives, okay? There's your school teachers, your engineers, etc. The key to this style of a buyer is that it's not relevant what product you're trying to sell. They are going to have to give 8 objections before they are going to purchase any product. Now, in this Larry Wilson course, what I learned was, you know something? You can go do the research on this yourself if you want. We know that this is almost a physical clicker in the client's mind. And if you have a client that is sitting out there and they're a foreclosed person, they have to make that clicker go 4 times. If you want to do your own research, go down to a Walmart store. Look around. Find a middle-aged lady that's pushing her cart around that's not in a rush. She's just kind of shopping, okay? And watch her. Don't get caught for stalking her now. We don't want to do anything wrong here, okay? But watch her as she shops. Because pretty soon you'll see her stop, and she'll look at this product on the shelf. Now in her mind, she's starting her thought process, okay? Pretty soon you'll see her lift that product off the shelf, and she's looking at it. Now actually what she's doing is she's arguing with herself. She's trying to decide, should I buy this product or shouldn't I? And the bottom line is, when she's sitting there arguing in her mind, she's going, you know what? I should buy this pen. I know I'm almost out back at the office, and I kind of need a pen, but you know, I'm not out yet. I might last for another couple of weeks. I could wait for a couple of weeks to buy this, but you know, I'm here. I might as well pick it up. You know, that pen over there is only $1.90, and this pen's $2.99. But you know, I've always used this pen, so I kind of like this pen. And one or two things is going to happen. Either they're going to sell themselves on the concept and they're going to put the product in the cart, or they're going to lose the sale and put the product back up on the shelf again. But the fact is, what you'll see as you're watching this happen is you're seeing them arguing in their own mind. So the first thing that we want to recognize when we're out talking to a client is if a client brings up anything about why they don't want to buy your product, what they're really doing is in their own mind, they're trying to verify that they're making a good decision. They're trying to go through this arguing process. Since our products are fairly complicated, it dictates that the client doesn't have the ability to make that decision themselves. They need you to help them make this decision. The difference between talking about Larry Wilson's course versus what I'm talking about is that when you listen to Larry Wilson teach this, Larry Wilson always trained, watch the client's eyes, okay? If you see him look up and to the left, you know, yeah, you got a happy-go-lucky here to go for the close pass. If you see him look down and to the right, you better dig yourself in, you know, you're going to be in for a long haul here. I got done with that course, I went out in the field, and I started watching my clients' eyes. And what I found is when I watched their eyes, you know, they kept looking back at me, and they never did look any other direction. So I finally figured out, you're never going to know how many closes your client needs. All I have to know in my mind is that they do need a number of them. And here's what happens in selling all the time. You get out in the field, you walk into a prospect who's a foreclosed person. Now remember, the agent doesn't know how many closes this prospect's going to take. So the agent gets done presenting the product to the client, and he looks across the table and says, what option looks good to you? Now, at this point in time, we have to know our client's not a happy camper. Up until this point in time, he was having a perfectly great day. Sun was shining. He was thinking about going out for a drive today, okay? All of a sudden, some doorknob showed up and started talking about a product that he didn't want to think about in the first place. And now, this guy's trying to make him make a decision. And he only has one thought on his mind right now, and that is, how can I get rid of this agent without costing myself any money? And I always know one thing. Seniors have been around the block. You go out in the market and start selling seniors, and you start thinking in your mind that seniors are slow, I'll guarantee you aren't going to make a lot of money selling seniors out there. You start discounting their intelligence level, and I'll guarantee you, you're not going to make a lot of sales out there. You got to know that when you're dealing with these guys, they've dealt with salespeople their entire lives. They've dealt with real estate agents. They've dealt with car insurance salespeople. They've dealt with insurance salespeople. And they went to class that they were trained how not to buy stuff from people. At least sometimes you think they went to class to do that. And I'll tell you what, when this prospect gets that question thrown in, they know how to respond. They're going to turn around. And they're going to look right across the table and say, you know something, I think both of those options look pretty good. And I think this is a very serious issue, and it's something my wife and I should think about. But you know what? We made up our mind a long time ago that we would never buy any product the first time somebody was showing it to us. We need to think it over. And you know what's amazing? The reason that they use that answer is because it works. We know that industry-wide in life and health insurance today, 48% of all sales interviews end without the agent ever asking the client to buy one time. Isn't that amazing when you think about it? Why? Because there's too many agents out there that when that client throws that answer to them, they're going to go, okay, how about if I give you a call next week? I've trained thousands of new agents in my career, and I have to tell you, I can't tell you the number of times that a new agent come in the office and I'd say, how'd your day go? Ah, great, Mark. I tell you what, I closed 2 good deals. I said, you did, huh? You got the apps and everything? No, they're thinking it over, but you know, they're going to buy. I just got to go back out there and write them up. Any experienced agent knows, yeah, that probably ain't going to happen. Experienced agents know that that first objection is nothing more than a smoke objection. In over 90% of all sales, that first objection the client throws at you has no bearing on the client's buying decision whatsoever. They're simply trying to stall the decision right now, and they're hoping to get rid of you. But if you're a good agent, you know how to handle it. I'm going to look back across the table, and I'm going to say, you know something, Mr. Clint? You're right. This is a big decision, because long-term care insurance is expensive. But you know, whenever we buy any type of a product, we always ask ourselves 3 things. And I always look at Mom and I say, Mom, I'll bet you the last time you went out, you looked for a pair of shoes, you asked yourself the same 3 things. And that is, do I like it? Can I afford it? And do I need it? Let me ask you a question, Mom. Last time you went and bought a pair of shoes, I'll bet you when you were thinking about it, you said, you know, I need a new pair of shoes. So you drove down to a store, you looked around until you found a pair of shoes you liked, and you said, do I like those shoes? And you said, yeah. Then you flipped them over and said, can I afford them? And as long as you said, yeah, you bought yourself a new pair of shoes. I remember a few years back when my wife and I were thinking about buying a Learjet. And I was thinking about it for quite a while. And I said, do I need a Learjet? And I said, yeah. So we called up the airport down here. We drove down here. They flew this little jet in from Houston. We got out to the strip, and I walked in that little jet, and I looked around, and I said, do I like this thing? And I was going, yeah. Then they told me the price, and I said, could I afford this thing? Not a prayer in God's greenery. Needless to say, I didn't buy a Learjet, okay? But it doesn't matter what you're buying, you ask yourself those three things. So let me ask you a question. Do you think you need long-term care? If the client says yes, I'm going to check right there. Do you like the plans I showed you? If they say yes, I'm going to click the yes or the like. Then I'm going to say, do you think you can afford these plans? I don't want to take bread off your table. If they say yes, I'm going to look at them and I'm going to say, let me ask you a question. What do you need to think about? All I'm using here is what's called the CIA formula. The CIA formula says there are only 4 reasons a person won't buy a product you're selling. Number 1, they don't think they need it. Number 2, they don't like it or they don't like you. Number 3, they don't think they can afford it. Or number 4, they're in no hurry to purchase it. Doesn't matter what you're selling. When you get out there, you're going to first think you're running into all types of objections. But all of them fall into one of those 4 categories. So what I'm trying to do with the CIA formula is I'm trying to figure out what is their real issue. Do you think you need this product? If they say no, I'm going to stop. I'm going to isolate it. Why don't you think you need this product? And then I'm going to answer it. If they go, I need it, and I say, do you like this product? No. What don't you like about it? And then I'm going to answer it. By classifying, isolating, and answering their objection, I'm trying to uncover what's the true reason they don't want to buy. But I'm also realistic. When I do the need, like, and afford on anyone the first time, in almost every case, they're going to go, yeah, I think I need it. Yep, I do like it. Yep, I think I can afford it. And then they're going to come back and throw another objection at me. Why? Because if I haven't done any uncovering of objections during the presentation, the fact is, if they're a foreclosed person, they have to get that clicker to go 4 times. So when I reach the end of need, like, and afford, and I look back across the table and I say, what do you need to think about? In most situations, what they're going to do is they're going to stop and go, click. You're right. I don't need to think about it. Of course, they're not saying that, right? Why? Because they're a foreclosed person. They have to get some more of these clicks going. So they're going to look at across the table and say, well, God, you know, it's pretty expensive. Okay, now we get another objection. You're a good agent, though. You know how to handle this. I'm going to look across the table and go, well, Mr. Client, I can understand that. But, you know, if you think $150 a month is expensive, what are you going to think when one of you need care and all of a sudden you're trying to budget $6,000 a month? Most of my clients found it's a whole lot easier to budget $150 a month now than waiting and trying to work $6,000 into their budget. What do you think? Typical person's going to go, yeah, that's a pretty good point. Click. Another click's going to go. But they're not quitting yet, right? They're keeping going. And really, this might be their first click right now if the CIA formula didn't take hold and cause that click to occur. So now they got one down. They're going to look across the table and say, well, you know, that all sounds great, but I should talk to my kids. Well, that's another objection. Of course, you're a good agent. You've learned all the answers. And I'm going to look across the table at the client, and I'm going to go, you know something? I agree. You should talk to your kids. Because at the point in time you need care, I'm going to have to work with your children to help them solve the whole situation. But the problem is right now, we don't even know if you'll qualify for coverage. So I always tell people, why waste your kids' time in case you can't get a policy in the first place? Why don't we go ahead and fill out the app and send it in and find out if you qualify? If you do, I'll give you a call. And if you want, you can have the kids here when I bring the policy back out. I don't care. You can have your doctor, your attorney, or anybody else you like here too, by the way. In the client's mind, they go, okay, that's a pretty good answer, and click. Now, for your typical client, now we got 3 clicks down. But they're not done yet, are they? So the client looks across the table at this point in time and says, you know something? We really need to think about it. And I don't really appreciate somebody that's kind of a hard sell person. And what happens? The agent quits. Why? Because they don't want to go out there and they don't want the client to think they're a hard sell person. So the agent packs up and they take off. And what happened? The client just accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. He got rid of you and he didn't have to spend any money. Now the problem is that you really did a pretty good job with this client. And now the client's sitting there for a period of time. Might be 3 months, might be 6 months, whatever. And all of a sudden another agent calls him and gets into the house. That agent does a presentation. He reaches the end of the sale, looks across the table and says, "What do you people think?" And they go, "You know what? It looks good. Let's do it." And that agent walks out the door going, "Wow, happy-go-lucky." They weren't happy-go-luckies at all, were they? They were foreclosed people. You did 3/4 of the work. That agent got paid. That's why I always tell new agents, when you first get out in the field, you have to be ready in your mind to recognize this concept and to realize, I have to make sure I do enough closes with a client to make enough money. When I'm doing sales seminars out there, I used to laugh because I did all-day seminars, and about 2, 3 in the afternoon, everybody in the audience would start to just sit back in their seat. They're getting a little bit sick of this. It's been a long day. So I'll look out and I'll say, before I let you guys go, let me tell you how every person in there can double your income tomorrow. I'll guarantee it. That gets everybody sitting up in their chair, okay? They're looking at me now going, okay, tell me how I can double my income. And when I get down, I say, okay, here's how to double your income. Always make sure that you close the client 4 times before you leave their house. And I'll tell you what, I'll watch half the audience kick back in their chair again. And I look at them and go, every one of you that just kicked back in your chair, you did that because in your mind you're saying, I always close clients 4 times. And my answer to that is bullshit. Because if you were truly closing everybody 4 times, you'd be making a ton of money and you would have no need to come into a seminar like this. If you could get yourself to close 4 times, remember that little square I talked about earlier, the happy-go-lucky? There's one closed person. This line right here represents the 2 close. This line represents the 3 close. Now take a look at this entire triangle. There's your first 3 closes. If you could just get yourself to close one more time, that 4th close would close a larger group of people than the group of people all combined with 3 or less closes. 4 closes would double your income if you typically do 3 closes. If you want to go out there and become a master agent, I would tell you, you would never leave the client's house until you have closed the client 8 times. Why do we say 8 times? Because remember, that's what a pure analytical needs out there. So I'm going to run 8 closes minimum, and if I don't close in the 8th close, I'll throw a suicide close before I walk out the door. You know, life insurance, which is what I was brought in. You all remember the old days of selling life insurance. The suicide close I was trained was on my way out the door. I would stop by the kids, and I'd apologize to them. And I'd apologize to them that I failed to sell their parents' life insurance. And because of that, when their dad died, they might not be able to continue living in this house that they were used to. And they might not get to go to college like the other kids. You know, we call it a suicide close because you kept a close eye on Dad. You didn't want to be committing suicide here. I always laughed at that because that's what you call hardcore selling. In long-term care, I use a suicide close. I don't recommend agents use it. It's a pretty tough close. But I will look across the table when I reach the point that I think the client is frustrated. And I'll just say, you know something, we spent the last couple hours here talking about long-term care. And I'm looking at you going, you know something, you need long-term care insurance. I'm looking at your financials here, and I'm seeing that there's no way you can tell me you can't afford to buy this. Okay? You've got plenty of money to buy it. So the only reason I can think that you're not buying it right now is because you don't like me. And if that's the case, I'll tell you what, go ahead and tell me. I can take it. But I'll tell you what, if you don't like me, here's what I'd like you to do. I'll tell you the name of an agent in your local area here that sells long-term care. Do me a favor, call them up the minute I leave. The reason I'm telling you that is because you don't want to take a chance on this any longer. You have gambled long enough, and I know that the odds of something happening to you in the next 24 hours is probably 2 million to 1. But the fact is, I play the lottery, and the odds are a lot worse than that, and somebody always wins. So I'm going to tell you, don't play around with this any longer. You need to get covered. When they come out there, tell them to sell you the same company I'm showing you right here. In fact, tell them to sell you this plan right here. Because I don't know that they're necessarily as strong as I am, and they might try to show you something that's not as good, and this is the plan that you need. So before I go, can I ask you a question? Is the reason that you're not buying because you don't like me? The reason I teach agents not to necessarily use this close is because it's a tough close. You're setting yourself right out there on a limb, and you're taking the chance that somebody's going to look at you and go, yeah, I don't like you. I have to be honest, I've never had a client tell me that. I'll tell you, the last time I used this close, I was talking to a lady. She was about 65 years old. She had been mocking me, even though through the whole presentation she was fine. I thought she had no objection. I got to the end, and all of a sudden, she starts throwing them out. So I did the suicide close, and she looked across. She said, no, it's not that one. So I said, can you share with me then? What's the real reason why you're hesitating here? She looked at me and she said, you know what? I don't have enough money in my checking account to write you a down payment right now, and I don't get paid again until next Tuesday. And I looked at this lady and I said, have you been stalling me for the last half hour just because of that? She goes, yeah. I said, how about if we do this? Let's fill out the application. I'll leave an envelope here with you, and I'll write the dollar amount of the down payment on the envelope. If Tuesday, when you get your money, if you still think this is a good idea, write a check for that amount of money and put it in the mail to me, and as soon as I get it, I'll send the app in. If Tuesday you decide, nope, this wasn't a smart thing to do, then do me a favor and just seal the envelope without any check in it and mail it to me so that I know you decided it wasn't a good idea. She looked at me and said, couldn't I just give you a check and could you hold it till Tuesday? I said, yeah, no problem. You know the interesting thing? I tell agents, I'll guarantee you, a weaker agent wouldn't hung around that long and would probably have left that house wondering in their mind, why didn't she do anything? The fact that I hung around a little bit and I threw that extra clothes at her is what brought her around to admitting what was going on. And you know what? I could see her doing that. If I would have been in her spot, I wouldn't have been perfectly willing to throw out the fact, well, I can't write your down payment right now. I'd be embarrassed a little bit too. So what I'm telling you is that when we're answering objections, we need to remember we're not really doing anything to hurt people. We're not really doing anything to do anything except to give them the knowledge they need to make a good decision. We're helping them think about this in their mind. If you get a client that throws, I can't afford it at you, what the client's really saying in their mind, assuming that you did a good suitability here, by the way, the client's really saying, I'm not so sure the premium justifies the benefits that you're giving me. So I might use that to compare the premium to the cost of care like I showed you earlier. Actually, for myself, I'm a firm believer that when you're selling long-term care, I'm going to tell my clients right up front, I don't think you should pay any long-term care insurance premium out of your monthly income. I'm not a big believer in that. Because here's the deal. If you need long-term care tomorrow, could you afford the cost of long-term care out of your income? Most clients, the answer is going to be no. And I'm going to say, okay, here's the deal. You're not buying long-term care to protect your income. You're buying long-term care insurance to protect your assets. So I always tell people, doesn't it make sense that we use your assets to buy the coverage? And then I'll move into a goose and golden egg close. I'll just ask a question. You ever heard the story about the goose and the golden egg? I don't care who they are. In the back of their mind, they're going, yeah, I remember that story, okay? They might not remember it exactly, so you might just want to go for the hit and say, what was the moral of the story? The moral of the story was, don't kill the goose, keep the golden eggs, right? And then I tell them, you know that CD you got at the bank down there? That's kind of like your goose, because it's sitting there, and every year it gives you a golden egg, doesn't it? What's the golden egg? The interest you get on it, right? So what I'm going to tell you is, don't kill your goose. Just give me a little bit of that egg every year, and I'll draw an umbrella protection over everything that you built up your entire life. Or I might use an annuity close, looking at taking the client's money from one investment, putting it into an annuity where I can get a better rate of return and using the difference to pay for the long-term care insurance. Again, what I'm trying to do is show the client how I can show them how they can pay for it without affecting their standard of living. Because I always tell agents, always remember one thing. If you just go out there and you throw a premium on the table, you know what? If that client has got bills and that premium is taking a large chunk of their disposable income, it's easy for them to say no. Mom and dad might have $3,000 income coming in, but if $2,400 of that is already gone, that means they have $600 a month, right? That's their disposable money. And if you all of a sudden are asking for $300 of that $600, you're taking 50% of their disposable income. If mom likes to go to the casino once a week and she blows about $100 a week, mom's decision all of a sudden is, do I go to the casino or have long-term care insurance? And if her decision is going to the casino or having long-term care, who do you think is going to win that battle? You know what? You're right. Casino's going to win that battle every single time. So I want to make sure I'm not affecting their standard of living when I'm selling them coverage. The client comes back with, I need to think it over. I'm always going to start with the need, like, and afford. But I always, in the back of my mind, know I might have to answer that objection 2 or 3 times. Always know if you are having a lot of clients in the sales with, I have to think it over, that's not necessarily a legitimate sale. You are not being a little bit hard enough to help that client make up their mind. Have more than one answer available. If my client comes back with, I want to think it over again, I might use the working period of time. I'm going to say, something? You're right. I think you should think it over. How long do you think you need? They come back and say, well, a couple weeks. I'll go, you know what? I don't think a couple weeks is good enough. I think if it was me, I'd want to think about it for at least a month. Don't you think? When they say, yeah, I say, you know what? That's what the working period of time is for. Why don't we do this? Let's fill out an app. Let's send it in. And while the company's thinking about you, you can be thinking about whether it's a good decision. If at any point in time you decide you don't want to do it, I'll notify the company. They'll refund all of your money. It won't cost you a dime. In fact, when I come back out here and give you the policy, you have 30 days from that point in time to decide if you want to do this or not. If for any reason you decide you don't want to do it, they'll give you back every dime you spent. Because here's the deal. The experienced answer came from Ed Clark, and I love it. He just looks at him and said, you know what? My experience has shown me that if you don't initiate the application when the writing agent is here, 99% of the time, it just gets swept under the rug. And you know what? This decision isn't going to be any easier a year from now or 2 years from now as it is right now. The fact of the matter is, if you would think that at some point in your life you might need long-term care, you might as well make a decision now, yes or no. That's kind of my feeling when it comes down to I want to think it over. And if you are getting a lot of I want to think it over, I'll tell you what, in your presentation, when you reach the slide where it talks about what the agent's job is, stop right there and say, well, you can't buy long-term care insurance today. I am going to ask you to make one decision today, and that is whether you want to start the process or not. Because I have a lot of people that I have to talk to each week, and I don't have time to make callbacks. So if you don't want to do it today, that's fine. Just tell me. But when we reach the end, I will ask you to decide if we should move forward or not. Is that fair to you? And I'm just letting the client know up front, it's okay to tell me no. I just don't want you to sit and procrastinate and not make any decision. If a client comes back and says, I need to talk to my financial planner, I'm just going to come right back and ask them, let me ask you a question. Has your financial planner ever talked to you about long-term care insurance? Most cases they go, no. I say, you know what? I can't blame them. They work in a whole different field. Your financial planner's job typically is to take your money and make a return on it, right? My job is to protect your assets. So I can see why they haven't talked to you about it, because most long-term care insurance is sold by agents like myself. We specialize in this area. And a lot of agents out there are a little gun shy when it comes to long-term care. So you want to tell your planner, because he'll be happy that you made a decision, or she will be happy that you made this decision. But don't necessarily rub it in about the fact that they didn't bother to talk to you about it. I'll do virtually the same thing with a P&C agent. If the client says, I need to talk to my children, the most logical argument I can come up with there is to say, let's find out if you can qualify first. If you can, then I'll tell you what, have them come to the interview when I bring the policy back. If they really want to talk to me prior to that point in time, have them give me a call, and I'll go out there and I'll show them exactly what I showed you. What I want to make sure of here is I don't want anybody else telling the kid what I tried to tell mom and dad. If anybody's going to talk to the kid, I want to do it myself. I can show them why mom and dad made this decision. If mom or dad are sitting back there trying to tell them, they're not going to do anywhere near the job I can explaining the situation. Plus, it gets me into the kids' house. I may find they're good prospects for long-term care. If a client says, I want to shop around, I will run right back to the fact of saying, I'm a broker. I represent all of the major companies out there. And let me tell you something, if there's any company you want to look at, no problem, tell me. I'll make sure I reach in there and I'll give you a quote from them. But right now, I'm trying to get you qualified with the best company that I think fits your situation. Let's find out if they'll accept you. Because I have somebody in my briefcase right now that I know will accept you. But their policy isn't necessarily near as good as the company I'm showing you right here. Does that make sense to you? Always know I like to shop around is a pretty logical objection when you think about it. One thing clients don't want is to buy a product and find out later that they paid too much for a product. So expect that one and have a good answer for it. When I sell down south, especially down there in Tennessee and northern Mississippi, etc., an objection that you'll run into a lot is you'll get to the end of the sale and the clients will look at you and say, I need to pray about this. When I'm training down there, I normally tell the agents there's two ways you can handle it. Number one, say, no problem, can I pray with you? And go ahead and join. The way I used to handle it is I'd say, no problem. I'll tell you what, I got a couple things I can do out in the car. How about if I walk out there and give you a few minutes here to pray? And then I'd walk out to the car and stall around for 5 or 10 minutes. I remember one time I was selling with Dwayne Mize, and we were in a house, we were talking to two sisters, and he gets to the end, he shows them the policy, and they turn around and said, well, we need to pray about this. Dwayne said, no problem, we got some stuff we can do out in the car. He said, how about if we leave you alone for about 10 minutes? They said, sure. So we walked out the door, and as we got outside, Dwayne said, I really don't have anything in the car, it's pretty hot, why don't we just walk around the house? So we go walking around the house. Well, we were been sitting in the dining room with these two ladies, and As we walked by, I could see that the window was wide open, so we could hear them in there. And here they were inside there on their knees going, "Oh, Lord, please help us to get rid of these insurance agents." Okay, no, I'm just kidding you. Okay, the fact is that we don't run into I need to pray a lot up here. But if you ever do, remember, there's a couple ways that you can handle that one. Always remember, if you want to be a true master salesperson, you're always going to make sure that you close 9 times, just in case you dupe one of the closes and that clicker doesn't go off. However, today, most sales trainers train that your real objective in the presentation is to eliminate the objections you're going to see at the end of the presentation. I want to try to uncover all of the client's objections during my presentation rather than waiting till the end of the sale. I prefer to get to the end of the sale and not see any objections at all. But if you do see them, or you do run into that client that throws a couple at you, I hope some of the stuff that you learned today helped you out. In the next couple of days here, I've got some more expert webinars coming up. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'm doing the recommendations webinar. If you haven't heard the recommendations webinar, this is when I really push you, especially if you're an experienced agent, to come on board and listen to that. I think it will change your opinion about recommendations long term. If you're an experienced agent, another one you might like is selling wealthier clients. I'm going to talk about the concept of leveraging dollars here and show you a situation where I actually had a client fire a financial planner who had recommended to him not to buy long-term care insurance. Then tomorrow at 11 o'clock, I've got one called Don't Sell the Farm, basically showing people why selling assets is not a good way to cover the risk of long-term care. If you want a copy of today's slides, feel free to either email me at markr@goldencareusa.com, or you can email the support staff at info@goldencareusa.com, or you can pick up the phone and call marketing support at 1-800-842-7799. Other than that, I want to thank each and every one of you very much again for coming into the webinar. I hope that you learned something from this that'll help you out in the field. And I wish you all a good day and goodbye and good selling. This is Mark signing off.